This is the Vision 79 podcast, where my friend Sander and myself, Mason, discuss recent developments in our business and personal growth. The name Vision 79 comes from our respective racing numbers. Sander's is 40, mine is 39, and we have a shared vision for success in business and personal life. Many successful people have started small, just like us, but very few of them have documented their early years. They often say they wish they had, and given we believe in learning lessons from others, we intend to be the first to document our journey from start to finish. Today, we'll discuss our theories on whether or not video games prepare you better for business, the generational gap in video game perception, how to balance the positives and negatives of gaming, and much more. But first, we start each podcast with a brief update on where we're at in our business and personal lives, so that when we go back and watch these episodes later in life, we can kind of gauge where we're at in our process. So what do you have for business this week?
So business this week, I have dropshipping. That was my primary focus this week. Finished the acquisition of the other website / dropshipping business that I'm going to be taking on. Started running the ads that he had on it prior, and also threw a few of my own on there. Conversion rates are looking pretty good, anywhere from 5% to 10 or 11%. So that means like 5 to 10% essentially of the people who click buy, which is pretty good for dropshipping.
Cool.
Sales and all that other stuff I'm going to go through in a little bit more detail. But I started running on February 4th, and today is February 9th. So, obviously today is not over, but sales as of right now, this podcast, is $3,934.58. The ad spend since that point has been $2,177.82. And then with fulfillment, at the end of the day, it drops out to $137.67 in profit.
Awesome.
This includes one day where I completely fucked up and burned a bunch of money on accident because the account was in CST time and not EST time. So when I turned it on at midnight, I actually turned it on at 11 p.m. and it blew my entire budget in an hour. So that was not so fun. But the best day that I've had was on the 5th with $292 in profit. Actually, sorry. Yeah, that was kind of a weird day because that was actually a mix between 2 days. So I'll say the authentic real day is $236.38 in profit with a gross sales of $1,040, a fulfillment cost of $382.48, and then an ad spend of $421.41.
Cool.
So, if I can get those kinds of days every day, that'd be awesome. That was a Friday. That was the 7th. So, right now I built some new advertisements, which I share with you this morning. I'm thinking those are going to convert better than what I had. I think they're higher quality. I really like the voice on those a lot better than the old ones.
Did you get feedback?
I did, and I forgot it. I'm sorry. What the hell?
I think that's from the fan.
Oh, yeah.
I said you should change the voice to Obama because it's super
cool.
Oh, yeah. I think it'd be funny if Obama said it.
I think it would be funny. Michelle Obama, maybe. And Obama together on the same ad.
Yeah.
That would be funny.
Co-parenting.
Yeah.
But that's good because right now at work, it's like $220 a day, right? Before taxes, but only 5 days a week.
Probably so like $240 because taxes are high. It's like 25% or something like that. Like overall average. It's something like that, isn't it? Isn't that what you told me the other day? I thought you said it was like 27% or something.
Overall, it's like 15 or 20%.
Okay. Let's just say 220 for easy math or whatever.
Yeah. Divided by, so there's 56 weeks in a year. Is it 50?
Yeah, it's 13 pay cycles, I think.
Mine's 26.
Oh, sorry, 26 pay cycles. Yeah.
Yeah. Do we want to do it by pay cycle?
So there's 52 weeks in a year. It doesn't really matter that much.
Well, I'm trying to figure out.
Mason's doing the math for us.
Well, actually, if we want to do it before
analytical endeavor.
If we want to do it before taxes, we just do divided by 7 and then multiply that by 5. So it's 57,000 and then divide that by
365.
Yeah. 156.
After tax.
Wait, no, hang on. That's not right. Because that's Does it matter? I can do this off camera. It doesn't matter that much. But the point that I'm saying is, if it's like 220 or 240 a day right now, that's only 5 days a week. So 7 days a week, it's lower than that. So if you can do those numbers every day, then you're including the weekends now. Yeah, it's easier. It's easier to attain.
Yes, I agree. So I'm hoping that the new ads will convert better and start to scale. I have high hopes for it, but proof is in the pudding. So we'll see. Right now, the things that are lessons learned essentially is like sometimes there will be an ad campaign that will do absolute dog shit one day, and then it will do like super, super well the next day. And so it's just, I might be spending $100 a day on that ad campaign, which sounds like a lot, but that's pretty low in the grand scheme of Facebook. And so it can be really volatile at that point. And so you have to look at it at like 4 or 5 day averages for those kinds of campaigns. So I have some website edits that I want to do. And I'm also going to be talking with another supplier to see if I can get some slightly better pricing on that end. And then I'm just going to edit, tweak a little bit the ads that I sent you, add some captions and stuff. And I'm hoping to start running that campaign scheduled for midnight tonight.
Cool.
So hopefully I'll be able to look at it during the week this week and see how it's doing. But overall, very happy, overall net positive, even after all fees and shit, hits, after everything washes out, it's still net profitable.
Right.
So I'm happy about that. And as a side note, it's really weird getting paid every day from like a business, like you usually wait 2 weeks, but it's like every day I get like, some amount and it hits my account.
Yeah.
It's just like really weird,
But good weird.
know. Yeah, good weird.
Right.
So,
right.
But yeah, it's strange because it feels like a lot of money coming in, but also the bills are big.
Yeah.
So it's like, big bills and big payouts. You know what I mean? So overall, happy, doing good. So that was my business update for this week.
Cool, dude.
What about you?
I'm happy to hear it's good.
Thank you. You put some metrics together the other week, so I was like, I'll put metrics together this week.
What metrics did I do the other week? Oh, the taxes?
Yeah.
And that's not even over either, which is fantastic. So my real estate coursework is complete, but I still have to do my course exam and state exam. I did my practice exam, and I need a 70 to pass the real exam. I got a 69, so I missed it by 1 point on the practice exam. But there was a bunch of stuff in there that I wasn't expecting because Grace gave me like a cheat sheet based on what her exam looked like.
Yeah.
And I got that down back and forth, and that got me probably like a 20% bump on the practice exam. So I pushed my state exam from this upcoming Tuesday to this upcoming Thursday, but it should be no different that by episode 30 of the Vision 79 podcast, I should have my real estate license.
50? 60? Sorry?
50.
You said 30. You said episode 30.
No, I said 50.
We'll watch it back.
Okay.
I know it's 30.
Okay. I think I said 50. You might have misheard me, but 50.
Put it in the comments.
This is 49, and the next one's 50. So whether I take it Tuesday or Thursday, by the next episode, I should have it.
Very close. Cool.
Yeah.
Are you going to be taking PTO to try and sell?
No. So I have to take PTO for the day of the exam because it's a 3-hour exam. But I after I get my license, I have to figure out what brokerage I want to work with. So I'm going to start putting together lists of what makes a good brokerage because they're not interviewing me. I'm interviewing them, So I have to figure out what makes a good brokerage or not and then schedule interviews. That'll probably take 2 weeks. And then by the time I decide one, it depends on how much money I have saved up if I can quit my job right then and there or not. But I'm going to talk to Tyler because right now he's ramping back up again too. So if he can feed us referrals or phone lists, I can probably like take a day off a week or take a couple hours off, like a long lunch, and then just eat at my desk later on and make calls then to try to get leads. So generally speaking, what it's going to be is trying to get leads from lists or Tyler and then give them to Grace to actually process and communicate with the people. And then once that's making enough money, I'll quit the job at Northrop and then do it full time. But it depends on what brokerage I sign with and what resources I have. Because if I don't sign with Tyler's brokerage and I don't have another Tyler at a different brokerage, then it's probably going to take longer.
Yeah.
But if I go with Blue Marlin and I have Tyler and Tyler's like, dude, quit tomorrow, like we'll make money right away, then more alluring to do that,
Yeah.
But
yeah.
The focus right now is more so on just, can I learn this stuff to take the test? Because it's a lot of shit. But additionally, the people who I've been talking to, they all say like, oh yeah, just learn it for the weekend and then forget it. Because you're never going to need any of it. And it's probably true, like to do the job of a real estate agent, it's probably true that you don't need all the information. Because to close a sale, you don't really need to know like how to do the appraisal process because you're not the appraiser, right? You contact an appraiser and then they do it. And then they send that information to your lender to make sure that everything is square. So I don't need to know how to do that. But the benefit of the real estate course is it teaches you about that process so that if anybody has questions, I'm more informed. So by knowing that information, it makes you a better real estate agent because you know more about the system of real estate.
Sure.
So everybody who's telling me like, oh, just remember the information and then forget it. I've changed my approach from I'm going to remember all of it for the exam and then dump all of it to actually, it's probably better for me if I really understand everything and not memorize it, but just understand how the system works.
Right.
So I'm taking it from a different approach, which is why I'm not upset that I'm having to push the exam an extra couple days because every day that I study more is more retention that I get. So like a great example is there's tax exemptions that you can get for living in specific cities and counties, right? So you can take deductions on your taxes based on if you live in a city or county up to $50,000. If you live in a school zone, it's an extra $25,000. If you're a widow, it's an extra $5,000. If you're a veteran, if you're disabled, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's all these different exemptions you can take, right? And then there's different tax rates based on those areas as well.
Yeah.
So that would give me a competitive edge when selling to somebody if I know, generally speaking, what type of deductions they're going to get from one property or the other. So maybe this property costs a little more, but you're going to be getting more deductions because you live in the school zone. So I don't know if you've considered that, but that makes your mortgage payment a little bit lower. So maybe this higher price one isn't a bad option, you know, and a less experienced agent or someone who took the test and then forgot all that information wouldn't have that available.
Yeah.
And you're not always going to have informed buyers. So on top of that, I don't know if I can talk about that. I'll tell you off air, but there's other stuff that I want to do that requires this information that's bigger than just selling houses. But I want to start with just selling houses. But
Got it.
that's the business update. I don't have a life update because I don't have a life anymore. But I ran into Eli at Joel's party last night.
Oh.
And he's selling health insurance.
Yep.
And what's interesting about selling health insurance is when you make a sale, you get commission. Just like real estate, just like solar panels, just like anything else, selling a car, right? Well, what's interesting about health insurance is the people you sell to, they then make monthly payments on their health insurance and you get a cut of that.
Oh, interesting.
So as time goes on, if I sell over the course of 2025 to 100 people, right, every sale I make is not just the commission, but then a monthly payment of like $20 a month or something like that. So if I can sell 20 people at $20 a month, then next year I might not have to make any sales because now I'm getting what, $400 a month from those 20 people. So what Eli was telling me, he was like, oh yeah, like I want to build it to where it's just passive income and then go do something else that I actually care about. And I was like, what do you mean passive income? Because like I hadn't registered that. But it's almost like residuals from like the Seinfeld show, right? Like they get paid per episode and then you get paid residuals after the fact. But I thought that was really interesting. I have no interest in selling health insurance, but I thought it was cool. And I'm wondering if there's a way that you can change, like there's got to be some other like sales scheme where you can use that to incentivize salesmen. You know what I mean? Somewhere out there. Like you get payments for the life.
Yeah, anything that's like monthly subscription style, you could do it pretty easily.
Yeah, or even like, you know, like if you buy a mortgage on a home, like a 30-year mortgage, you pay the mortgage plus the interest rate to the bank. But what if there's an additional like, you know, 0.25% or something like that that goes to the salesman, but you don't earn commission up front, but you earn payment off the mortgage.
Yeah.
Interesting. So anyway, what's your life update?
No, I don't have one.
Okay.
I'm tired. My life update is I'm tired.
Understandable.
Very tired.
Okay, cool. Then let's get into it. So the main theme of today is, does gaming prepare you for business? So we once had a conversation in college where we discussed how much time I had spent playing video games in high school. And I felt that those hours I was losing and I wouldn't be able to get back in life. But you had a different perspective. You pointed out that video games actually teach you critical skills.
I pointed that out?
Yeah, including strategy, problem solving, reflex timing, decision making under pressure, and even social and team building skills in multiplayer games. Because I was like,
I said that?
Yeah, you did.
When?
This was in college.
Oh, in college. Oh, God.
Yeah.
Okay.
So recently, recently,
Like, that's so opposite from what I wrote.
Well, this was
what's going on.
This was in when we were in the SAE team together. I was like, bro, like I can't believe that like there's a in the cultural zeitgeist of video games, every winter break, everyone like hears the calling to play Minecraft again. So you like sign into your old account and play with your friends and stuff. And I had done that cyclically for years until we started doing SAE. And then I was like, oh, it's weird that everyone's reaching out to me to start playing video games again. And this year I'm like, no, because I feel like I'm losing all that time.
Yeah.
And now I'm wondering, well, fuck, how many hours have I wasted of my life? And you were like, well, it's not really wasted because like, you know, A, what are you going to be doing in high school and middle school anyways? And then B, you're developing skills that can later be applied to business so long as you don't keep applying them to video games. But recently, Elon Musk spoke on the Joe Rogan Experience about the video games that he plays because he's nationally ranked in Diablo.
Yep.
And that further
He was
emphasized...
answering #1 last time I heard.
Yeah. And that further emphasized the point that video games actually might not be a waste of time if you apply them correctly. So today I want to discuss this topic more in depth and start off with our first segment because we're not doing the main points anymore, which is our parents' generation's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of want to follow this chronologically, like following the progression of video games. So when video games first started hitting their stride, the older generation, like our parents, largely didn't get it. I get the feeling this was kind of similar to like how their parents were pushing back against rock and roll because it was thought to corrupt younger audiences into being like sadists. And our parents' generation thought video games were corrupting us into be like vegetables, total degenerates, right? So what are your thoughts on this comparison? And do you think there's any validity to the older generation's claims?
I think yeah. I think there is validity because I think a lot of people. I think the real danger of the video game is that it can be an instant dopamine hit, especially as of recent. Like a lot of older video games, you would spend like 6-8 hours doing the same challenge and not get anywhere with it.
Yeah.
And you just continue to try and eventually you'd get, and then you'd be like, oh yes, got it, got whatever I was going for, right?
Right.
But now it's like the missions and the style of gaming and the graphics and like all the different little things you can do. There's an available dopamine hit everywhere all the time. And it's really easy to get. Like you can get it within 20-30 minutes of playing a video game, right? And I think a lot of business stuff is really contrary to that, right? Which we will get into. But I think there is validity to the kind of older folks' perspective of like, this is really dumb and I don't understand why you do it. Because there are a lot of people who just sit around and play video games or just go to a 9-to-5 so that they can, you know, buy the next gaming console and get the next video game and then play with their friends online.
Yeah.
Right. Like I think there is validity to that. And a lot of people don't do anything more than that in their life. And I don't know. It would be hard for me to brainstorm like a legacy impact you could have by being a video game player, but you could have a legacy impact by like helping a lot of people with a business.
A legacy impact, like impacting the world or like leaving something behind?
Leaving something behind, like it.
Like
I don't know, like maybe you could make a case for someone like PewDiePie or Markiplier or something like that. Someone who like plays video games professionally, like they'll leave an impact on the world, but it's like, what's that impact worth versus someone who like started a charity or started a company that was really successful and helped millions of people or blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean?
They must have charities somewhere, but I understand what you're saying. Like it's not the main focus of the business, right?
What I'm saying is that I don't see video games as an effective vehicle to leave a lasting impact after you're gone. But I do see business as having that potential. And I see it as having a greater potential to have a positive impact on the people around you, because I think there's a higher percentage of people who play video games who do not have a positive impact on the world around them.
Yeah.
Overall.
I saw that.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
I think it's more, video games is closer to a hobby, like a sport, where you can make an impact on the world, but nowhere near the level that you could in business. So like the greatest sports players in history, they might inspire, but they won't influence, So like, I think that some of the best business people grew up idolizing sports players like Michael Jordan. So they may have given them the inspiration to go do the business stuff that they're doing. But like, it doesn't change the fact that, Elon wants to put people on Mars and Michael Jordan played basketball really well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What's interesting about video games compared to sports is that Like, what's like, I don't know what games PewDiePie or Markiplier.
I have no clue. I just know the names.
Right. But let's say that I know that FaZe Clan was big with like Call of Duty, right?
Sure.
Like first person shooters games. So let's say that FaZe Clan is like the best first person shooter game ever, similar to how like Michael Schumacher was like the best Formula One player or driver ever, right?
Yeah.
So like the best in their field. I think the difference is Call of Duty, like that game, video games are developing so quickly that that game no one plays anymore, right? Like there will be another one, there will be a new one, and like eventually they'll be forgotten because that game will be forgotten. But the sport evolves under like one banner. So like, yeah, there's new cars, but it's the same sport, right? Basketball doesn't even change as much. It's like they changed the point system, but that's it. Like the game is still the same. So you can leave a longer impact emotionally on a culture, but not physically, because you're not developing something new that's like furthering humanity. Like there's not a greater purpose, like you're saying. But it's interesting because it's like like you could argue that business has the most impact, and then sports heroes have like a similar emotional impact that like lasts behind, less physical but more emotional. But video games are even less than that because they'll be forgotten eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. I just like I see so many people who get looped into the immediate dopamine hits of video games that I really like at this point in my life I really hesitate to make a positive case for it.
Yeah. It's kind of like how Elon goes on Joe Rogan and smokes weed and is like, yeah, dude, weed makes me think crazy thoughts. And then maybe I can make those thoughts into like some innovation that helps like the rocket get back on the launch pad after I launch it or whatever, right?
Sure.
But that doesn't mean that fucking Joe sitting, not Joe Rogan, Jimmy, like Jimmy sitting in his like fucking mom's basement at home. He's not going to smoke weed and then have an innovation to help the rocket land again, right? He's going to smoke weed because he wants to fuck around and play video games, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, is it the weed and the video games that makes a person successful, or is it the successful person who finds these tools to be helpful to their purpose, right? Because like the same people playing video games and smoking weed at home, like you can't say that you're like Elon because you smoke weed and play video games,
Right, but it's interesting because I think we've talked about this analogy before on the podcast, but you know, if you picture 3 different swap machines,
Yeah.
and you can choose one for your life, but you got to sit at that one for the rest of your life. There's one that spits out like 10 grand, you know, every couple days. There's one that spits out $1 million every, 3 years. And then there's another one that spits out $1 billion every 5 or 6 years. Right. And you just got to sit there and pump it and, do a little everything until you get a payout. And people will say, oh, I'll just sit at the 5 or 6 year one and get $1 billion and that'll be good. But in reality, what they choose in their lives are the $10,000 slot machine that they just keep hitting and hitting and hitting.
Right.
Right. And I think video games are kind of similar in that sense at this point, because it's like if you put that focus and dedication into something that could actually grow into something larger than a video game session, you'd have something really amazing. Because there are people who will sit and play video games for days or weeks on end. No problem. Like there's no issue focusing when it comes to that.
Right.
Right. It's like if you could put that focus and dedication and effort towards something, I guess in my opinion, that would actually grow and, have an impact and, be more tangible and I think valuable personally than a screen or a little character in a game. Then you could be super, super successful. But the immediate dopamine hit of having a video game and being able to do missions constantly and getting this little hit 30 minutes later and then this one 30 minutes later and whatever is what keeps people hooked into it. And then they expect that out of the rest of their lives. They expect that in business, although in business it can take years, or more. In anything that's in a lot of things that are not video games or social media, it takes time to foster a reward. And if your brain is tuned into getting immediate rewards, very similar to social media and TikTok video games,
Right.
Then I think that inhibits your ability to be able to persevere through something that would actually bear better fruits in the long run.
Yeah. I think the time between effort input and dopamine hit is a big influence on that. And I have this is why I bring up the generational gap, because the silent generation, who was born in like the 20s to the 40s, they had very like a hard work ethic and rigid priorities. They were called the silent generation because they just put their heads down and did the work, right?
Yeah.
And then after that came the boomers, where they started to like rock and roll and like hippie shit and LSD, and they had kind of flexible priorities. They would still get a job at the lumber mill, but like on the weekends, maybe they'd like catch an STD or something, you know? And now with Gen Z and Gen Alpha, with video games, so like, you know, work ethic, working in the coal mines, rock and roll, and video games now, there's way looser priorities,
Yeah.
right? And I think that it's probably due to the delta between the dopamine hit, right? But it's interesting how it's degraded throughout the generations.
Yeah. It's Alex Hormozy talked about how a lot of people want their first business to be their passion and start with their passion and like what they love doing, like art or drawing or, you know, fucking crocheting, whatever it is, right? And it's like that is such a poor, in his opinion, and I agree with him, a poor approach to business because you expect that business is just going to be this joyous experience of making my thing and then everyone's going to want it. Although in reality, there's a lot of hardship, there's a lot of struggle, there's, you know, pain, there's figuring out why shit's not working, why it is working, right? There's a lot more to it, and it's not just this like joyous, passionate experience all the time.
Mhm.
And so for you to like set the standard of like, I need it to be a passion and I need it to be passive income and I need it to be fulfilling every minute of the day, blah, 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 blah. Like it's just unobtainium. Like if you want to go into business to start, at least, you know, I think a lot of the time,
Okay.
you know, do you disagree?
Well, I'm trying to tie that
Uh,
into the video game thing.
Right. So
I understand the sentiment, but
Well,
like,
yeah,
I thought it was
okay.
leveraging off of the generational thing, so I'm trying to.
yeah, no, it is. It is. And so, you know, I think there's been a shift. Like people think that today businesses have to be this passionate thing that you love every single day. People think that every single moment of their life and every single 30 minutes has to be this like great reward, like social media or video games, or, you know, you talked about like the silent generation and the boomers and then Gen Z and Alpha that we have today. Um, it's been a consistent trend in the direction of like, how do I just get like some quick fulfillment and like have a little good time instead of like actually building and working towards something more meaningful and greater,
Right.
right? And I think that's reflected in all aspects, especially in the amount of people starting businesses that are our age. I think has declined, or at least the threshold to succeed has gotten lower because the effort level, broad spectrum of younger people, I think, is lower.
Yeah.
All right. And I would assume that you thought about this, but it's similar to the cycle of like, you know, good times create weak people create hard times create strong people, and then strong people create easy times create weak people, blah, blah, blah. Right.
Right.
And I think we're in one of those phases where times are relatively good, all said and done. You know, like we're not involved in a world war. There aren't, you know, millions of people dying every day on the battlefield. There are, you know, wars going on right now, but it's not to the scale of like World War I or World War II.
Right.
Right. And so you know, and there's more food available around the world today than there ever has been. There's more farms. There's, you know, more energy. You know, we have better technology. We have better communication. Like that, times are statistically on paper you would think are probably the best they've ever been today.
Yeah.
And I think that's creating a lot of people who are relatively weak in their ability to persevere through hard things. And I think you see that in the volume of people who play video games and prioritize these instantaneous dopamine hits over long-term struggle to bear something more meaningful.
Yeah, it's like a drug. It's like you can get hooked on it, and Adderall can be used to help you pass the SAT, but it could also be used to like, you know, you can abuse it really easily, right? So it's a tool in intellectuals' hands, and it's a oh man, what is it? It's fuck, dude, there's this great quote. Oh man, I can't remember it. I'll think about it. I'll get it back. Fuck me, dude. It's an Office quote. It's from the Office TV show. I can't remember. But it's all too easy to fall into the trap of losing your entire life to it, right? And if you don't pull yourself out of it, then you fall victim to it really easily, and the rest of the world doesn't matter because you fall into it. So like in high school, I spent over 1,700 hours in Ark Survival Evolved, and then probably double that in Assassin's Creed in middle school, and like triple that in Minecraft throughout like high school and college. So I spent like a shit ton of time playing video games growing up. And what's crazy is that when I stopped playing and people would ask me like, "Oh, like you should come play with us again," I would be like, "I don't know, man. Like I kind of feel like I'm wasting my time." I've spent like 1,700 hours. That's like fucking 80 days, right? And I'm not getting that time back. And they were like, "Oh, dude, that's nothing. That's light work. I've got like 5,000 hours in like 3 different games." I'm like, dude, like that's. I think the problem was when I got to college, I didn't have the time to play video games anymore. So like while you're playing them, I liked progression games. So I don't like the first person shooter where you die and respawn every 10 minutes because I like to progress towards something. So like in Minecraft, you have the same world where you can die multiple times, but you're building like a world, right?
Yeah.
So you play it over the course of hundreds of hours, which is I think one of the redeeming qualities of these video games. But that's in a later segment.
Yeah.
But that means to play this game, you have to invest like 500 hours to get to where you want to go.
Yeah.
You can't like log in and play for 20 minutes and be satisfied. It has to be hours to progress. And in doing so, when I got to college, I had to stop. So I'd log out of the game for like months at a time. And when I'd log back in, sometimes the world would be deleted or like my shit had been destroyed by another player or whatever, and like it'd all be gone and you have to start from scratch. And part of that is fun because you get to start fresh, like with your friends again. But on the other hand, it's like I remember there was one world that I had worked on, and I had gotten this game down to a point where like I had everything was streamlined. Everything was super efficient. Like I had all my resource lines coming in from like automated systems and stuff, and like I had figured it out. So it was like a real world application of Hormozy's power is the length of time between when you have a thought and when you can actually execute on it. And I had in the game gotten that down to really short. So I was doing really cool stuff that most people wouldn't be able to do in this game. And I had a blast with it. And I left for like 2 weeks. And when I came back, they were like, "Oh, we did like a server restart." So like everyone starts from ground zero again to give the kids who, you know, are getting beaten up by these players that are at the heights that I was at have a chance to like build up. And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, that's like, that was genuinely like probably like an 800-hour build that I had going. And it's just gone now." So like, what the fuck was all that time spent doing? Like, what was that?
Yeah.
And at the time, it felt like it hurt a lot because this time investment had just disappeared. So it's like if you work on your car for 3 years to finally get it running, and you get it running and you drive it for 2 weeks, and then, you know, someone hits it in a parking lot and totals it, right? And at the time, I was like, well, fuck it, I'll never drive a car again. I'm just going to ride the bus from here on, and I'm just going to get a scooter. Which I think is a valid feeling in the moment. But since then, I've come to mature a little bit about it and see a different perspective. But at the time, I was really upset with it. And from my parents' perspective, dude, if I had a kid and they were playing as much video games as I was, I'd be fucking freaking out. And there are some kids who don't come around to the real world like I had. Like my neighbor, Ricky. I remember I went over to his house. I would go over to his house to like watch SpongeBob and play Call of Duty and like play Minecraft and stuff because my parents wouldn't let me do those things. And so like he was the DGen house. So I'd go to the DGen house and he had like Minecraft. And my first ever experience with Minecraft, he had built a penis that had a water fountain coming out of the top of it. And I was like, okay. And I started to play Minecraft on my own because like the cool kid is playing Minecraft. And I was able to do like really fun, creative stuff with it, not building penises, but like building other like more creative things. And I had the realization that, oh, this can really easily be wasted on somebody who doesn't give a fuck and is like not mentally mature.
Yeah.
And I think that the video games for those people that are not mentally mature just fall into that void really easily. I think the only saving grace that our parents' generation probably doesn't anticipate is coming back from like beating addiction, like coming back from the brink. Because I think that with video games, there's enough benefit to them that if you can experience them without getting hooked, you can become a more efficient person, a better person. I think that the positives are there.
I'm glad you brought up this point because I was thinking about this while you were talking.
Yeah.
And I agree with you.
Yeah.
And I actually, after rethinking about what I said in college, I think I still agree with the words that with what I said, but I disagree on the value of the video games inherently because I think the ROI is very low. Because like right now, I have Dropshipping going.
Right.
And I am probably a dedicated 20 hours away from having a 914 on the road,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
And no money investment, right? Essentially, like I have some more gift cards I can use I got for Christmas and New Year.
Okay.
And I can get new tires with those, or I can get a couple new tires with those, and then I'll get the other two, right? Essentially, the financial investment is very low to get that car running.
Mm-hmm.
It only requires 20 hours, and I can have a whole nother vehicle that I could drive, enjoy, have fun, share with people, like work on, learn on, right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of return on investment by going through that process and sharing it, and it's a ton of fun. It's something I really want to do. Like it's like there's a lot of potential, unlocked potential there, and I can't justify the 20 hours for it, right? So it's like if my ROI for something that's other than my main focus gonna be at that standard, I can't justify 100, 200, 300, 400 hours to something that I can't even, that's not even tangible, right? Right? Like and additionally, this is the point I want to make, which I didn't make just now, but I had in my head. It's A, not tangible, but B, I feel like the skills you learn are like creative, how do I build this thing in the game? Or like what features or what tools can I unlock, or how can I get this better sword, or whatever it is. Like there are things that you learn, right? But I think you learn a lot of video game specific things alongside life skills that could be learned in a shorter period of focused time on those life skills. Right? Like I think the life skills you may learn are like perseverance through something, right? But then you have the added factor of like you are getting pretty consistent dopamine hits from a lot of modern games. Minecraft may be an exception to that because you build for long periods of time to get something, right?
Yeah.
But like for like shooter games or Assassin's Creed or stuff like that, like you can always do a mission in 30 minutes and get something out of it, right?
Right.
But you know, so there's that factor of it, is like, is there really perseverance? Because then these, you know, like video game kids or iPad kids go to sit down at a lecture or like, you know, at a meeting for an hour and they can't fucking sit still,
Right.
you know, or they can't listen to podcasts for more than 20 minutes because they just get defocused and they just throw it to the side and do something else, right?
Doesn't move fast enough.
Yeah, right. So there you are learning perseverance, but there's a lot of video games that don't really teach you that. And then the ones that do teach you that isn't really effectively applicable. So then it's like a question for me of like, what's the ROI of me spending hundreds of hours on this to the life skills that I learn versus like actually focusing on the life skills or doing something like business where it's a vehicle that inherently is effective at producing positive life skill and life changes and growth for you. Like the ROI is high for that in business. So I could take the same number of hours and put it in a video game, or the same number of hours and put it in a vehicle like business, and get a much higher ROI. And on top of that, this is where I started and where I should have ended, but with business, you actually have something tangible, right? Like you build something that like, oh man, like I can see the money come in, or I can see my website, or I can see this house I sold, or I can see this building I made, or whatever, right? Whatever you choose to do. And the ROI for me, at least in my mind, is it's much higher for a vehicle that's not video games. There are a lot of vehicles that it's higher for, right? Whether that's doing courses online and taking good diligent notes and actually learning from it, or reading books, or listening to long form podcasts on experts in a given field that you enjoy, or building a business or whatever, or like even sports, I would say, you know, because with sports, like the ROI is relatively high for sports because not only are you getting great physical fitness out of it, you're getting mental stimulus, your mental health is better, your physical health is better, but you're also bonding with people, you're learning how to communicate, learning how to persevere, learning how to shoot for goals that are long-term goals and not just short-term 30-minute goals. So the ROI, there are so many things that the ROI is higher for to actually grow yourself as a person rather than video games. Yes, video games have those benefits, but what's the cost, right? That's kind of the thing in my mind, I think, at this point, what I've come to. What are your thoughts?
I think that you made a really great distinction between types of video games. And I think that's I think that's probably the biggest divide between our parents' generation and our generation. Because I think that our parents' generation, when they see video games and they think about it, they think about like Call of Duty or Assassin's Creed, where it's like there's structure to it and it's kind of like you're watching a movie and you're interacting with it and that's it, right? Like there's no input or independent thought or strategy to it. It's literally just like, oh, I'm shooting this guy and now I'm dead. And so I'm going to hit the respawn button and try it again, right? Like super simplistic, non-strategy games. And there's a whole other section of video games, which is strategy based, and it's closer to like, 40 chess type stuff that does, I think, give you way more skills, but they're only skills that are valuable if you choose to apply them in the real world. Because like any simulation or any skills training, if you don't actually go out and apply it in the real world, then they don't, like, if you don't use the skills, then it doesn't matter. And you make a great point about at the end of video games, unlike with sports, where like if you put an effort in sports, at the end of it, you're a more developed human being that's more capable because you are stronger physically, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of video games, there is no physical output. You can delete the game and now there's nothing, right? But similar to how Hormozy says, when you learn education, when you educate yourself, you are the product, not the thing that you're building. Like the actual business could also be dissolved in a day and a half, but you are changed. You are evolved, right? And it's up to you whether or not you use those skills. So what's interesting about the 914 example is that it's a great example of when you should stop playing a video game, right? Because by you working on the 914, you're probably not going to develop your mechanic skill much because you already have those skills. You already have the physical tools, you already have the mental tools, and you're already familiar with the car. So all you get out of it at the end is the physical product. You don't get any of the growth, right? But your decade and a half of working on cars is inherently valuable, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't think you would go back and change those 10 years of working on cars because now you have the ability to fix problems like that, right?
Yeah, right.
So it's like you have identified, okay, I have developed this skill. I don't need to practice it anymore. Okay, I've learned everything I can learn from this video game. I don't need to play it anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And most people, I think the addictive quality of video games stops people from being able to determine, okay, I should stop now. I have everything.
Yeah. And there's obviously the question of like, what was the ROI of me spending 10 years on cars, right? Because I could have spent all that time building a business or doing something else, right? And I could potentially be financially free at this point and just pay someone else to fix my car. Right. Right. So there's a question of like, maybe I'm a little bit hypocritical on video games just because I think that screen things are stupid that you can't like build into something greater, right? Or at least from my perspective.
Yeah.
But what's the ROI on fixing cars? Right. That's also a question too. And then, you can make the argument that like, well, I could start a car business, or eventually when when I have more disposable income, I could start a racing team and just have that much more knowledge because of my experience in cars, right? But you could say the same thing for video games and say, well, you could start a YouTube channel and it could grow, and then you could get viewership and turn into a Markiplier 2.0 or PewDiePie 2.0, whatever, right? You can have that perspective. And so I get it. I just think that the probability of you playing video games and not turning into like a basement dweller lives at his mom's house in his 30s kind of guy,
right?
That probability is much higher for someone who just plays video games all day, every day, than it is for someone who learns at least like a trade, right? Or where I was consider like automotive could be like a trade, right? Because at least you can take that and effectively apply it to something that actually generates you revenue, right? Like, I'll call him out on the podcast, but Joe, the guy that we know at Pauhana, he drives that truck with the custom motorcycle on the back and stuff. Like he's building another one,
right?
And like he works at the Auto Body Engineers, which is him and his dad's business.
Cool.
And he works on cars there, and then he works on motorcycles on the side. And he was talking the other day about like maybe building more of these because his turnaround time on a bike like that is like 3 weeks, which is fucking ridiculous. That's insanely quick.
Yeah.
Right. Because he just like knows his shit and he knows where he gets stuff and he knows how to do it and he just makes it happen. And he's just like, yeah, I just built it for fun, but I was kind of thinking like I could sell this or sell that one because people love this style of like pit bike thing that I'm building, blah, blah, blah. Like, and like he actually has a business and like he has avenues to do that. And like I see him, he shows me pictures every week of like an update of where he's at with the bike. And every week it's just like this astronomical amount of more effort that he's put in to like a given thing. And it's like, that to me, at least from my perspective, has a more tangible output and it has a pretty decent ROI in terms of your development, and it can grow into something that can generate income and build you up. And it teaches you a lot of great values like perseverance and what we've talked about, and et cetera. But it just like it doesn't have the fact like you can't just hit the delete button on a bike you built. I mean, I guess you could if you like totaled it or something like that, right? But to me, it feels a lot different than a video game, because with a video game, you can just kind of hit the delete button and then all of your effort is gone. Whereas like, yes, you learn some skills along the way, but I really just deeply question the ROI on the skills, and not the ROI on the skills, the ROI on the video game to teach you those skills, as well as the final output of what you get. Right? That's where my real concern lies. And so I guess to answer the first segment of our podcast does the parent's perspective have any validity? I think definitely. And I think that validity comes from observations of seeing people who genuinely become degenerates that live in their mom's basement for most of their lives. Right?
Yeah.
I think there is a genuine, I have seen this happen. It's not just a old people doing old people things or doing the back in my day, blah, blah, blah thing. Like there are genuine problems that they see and witness, and they have reservations to what is the probability that this will actually benefit my kid or benefit, my grandkids versus not benefit them. Like there's a genuine disconnect in that.
Yeah. I think that there's too much risk that you get addicted to it, and that your goal is to get better at the video games or play more video games to take those skills and attribute it somewhere else.
Right. But I think video games, but like you said, there are a lot of video games that have longer term kind of satisfaction points, right? But there are a lot of them, especially as of late, that have very quick turnaround time on dopamine hits.
Right.
And I think that's becoming increasingly common because that's where the kids are going, and it's not the company's fault they're building games like that. It's the customer base that wants games like that, and then the company builds them, right?
Right.
But and I think that's a reflection of something larger like TikTok and social media, and as well as video games, that there's just been this trend to have very quick rewards for actions, right? And I think that the real world doesn't change very much. Like it just takes time to build something right and meaningful. But the alternative world of the online sphere doesn't necessarily reflect the way the real world has operated for many, many, many years.
In that it takes more time to get
It just takes more time. It just takes hard work. And sometimes shit doesn't come in 30 minutes.
Right.
Like for example, I could look at my dropshipping stuff, and like I was sweating a little bit this week because I was like, fuck, like it's not quite as profitable as I thought it was going to be. And that was, my fault partially for not pressuring my mentor on more of the metrics. And he didn't have a lot of time. He just wanted to hand it off to someone. And so I took it and I thought it was good. Right. Lesson learned, I should ask for solid metrics and breakdown of every single aspect before I acquire something like this. I still think it's going to be successful. It is still being successful. It's just taking more input than I anticipated, right? That's a lesson I learned, right? But there was a period in time where I was like, man, like, I don't know, like, is this going to work? Is it not going to work? Like, the margins are slim here. Like, I got to do this. I got to do that, right? I was sweating a little bit, but then I was like, it takes time to build something right. And I was like, if this one fails, if the next one fails, and the next one fails, and the next one does, like, that's okay. Because I only fail when I quit, right? And so I think that if I had like a video game instant dopamine kind of head, I would have been like, oh man, this day was terrible, what the fuck? And then just like thrown out the window and tried something else. Or like been like, this isn't going to work, and blah, 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 blah. But like, there was a day I lost fucking $300. And it's like, there aren't many days where I just wake up and have like, Bing bong. I figured that was going to happen. But there aren't many days where I wake up in my normal life and be like, oh, I guess I'm $300 poorer today. Right? Like there's not many like unknown variables like that in traditional life. And so it is weird, but you got to just have that longer term perspective. And that's what I worry about with people who play a lot of video games, is that long term perspective might not necessarily be there.
Yeah. I think that this is an interesting conversation because we have experiences with different video games. Because I always hated the quick turnaround video games.
Yeah,
like my brother,
interesting too. Yeah,
my brother briefly held a world record in Call of Duty.
Really?
It was the fastest. Like if you get like a certain number of kills in a row without dying, you get like a special thing. And he had the world record for the fastest, like from the start of the game to getting that special thing. Like he killed more people faster to get to that special thing than anyone else. And I was proud of him for doing that, but I was like, I can't play that game. Like it is too quick. Like I don't like it. I don't feel the satisfaction because things are happening too quickly. So I played all of the longer term strategy games that need hundreds of hours, but you get a bigger payoff at the end of it, which I feel better primed me for a business in the real world, because now I have no problem putting 300 hours into something for real estate because I know that the payoff is going to be there. But I think that to wrap up segment one, like you're saying, from the parents' perspective, they see the 98th percentile, which is kids want the quick dopamine and it doesn't develop anything, right? So segment two is on our generation.
I want to add something before we hop into that. I apologize, but I was thinking about it this week too. But I was thinking about, I think it's really interesting, our differences in our business path right now, at least, right? Because it's like, for me, I have something that generates some sort of revenue now, and then I have to figure out how to scale it. But then the brand factor is a real unknown big ass variable down the line, right? So I can get to a certain point, and then it's like, okay, but like, do I just restart now? Like, do I just do another one, right? Like the iterative, you have to iterate constantly to make it happen, right? Versus you're building something that's a longer term, but has this really wealth of skill at the end and can really develop into this big brand. And there's like a, the start, I would say, like your course load to start at 80 hours is higher than my course load to start at, like, clicking a few buttons to start a Shopify store, right? Like the starting point for you to get going, you had to put a ton of investment initially to get to those 80 hours, to get that course and like start working on the real estate, right?
I think you probably did around
I did too, right? I put a lot in, but like at the end of the day, I can start drop shipping a new store tomorrow with minimal knowledge, right?
Right.
Because you can just open up a Shopify store and make some ads. It's gonna do shit, right? But the threshold to start is really low, right? And but you have to constantly iterate, versus real estate, you build up a foundation into something taller, right? And for me to build drop shipping into something bigger and taller is a real question in my mind, right? Because I don't know anyone who's effectively gone from zero to like multi-millions of revenue a month and has this big brand worldwide, right? I know people who do really, really well, have, 6-figure days and stuff like that on gross, right? But that's a real question and a real variable in my mind.
Right.
And so I was thinking about that, and I was like, at the end of the day, I think it's really interesting, our two different approaches, at least at this point in life, because we're playing different games in business, right? And I think that's really an interesting comparison. I had a way to tie this into video games, and I forgot it once I started speaking. But I think it's cool. And I think it, we're playing different games, and video games are a completely different game. But what's the ROI on our game versus the ROI on a video game? Right.
Well, I attribute, so like with the real estate thing, I don't want to be like the best real estate agent in the country, and I don't want to build like a real estate selling company. But when we bailed on the bar, I analyzed, okay, what is it that I want to do, right? Because I can't start a business doing like the gym personal trainer stuff like Alex Ramosi right now, because Alex Ramosi had savings saved up. So, okay, if I need to build more savings, engineering isn't doing it for me. What's something that I can do where I can learn a skill that I'm going to need down the road to do the business that I want to do? Okay, sales. I've never sold anything before, apart from the baked goods stuff. So I'm going to learn how to sell, and that I'm going to do it in a way that is going to make me more money. And I'm also going to do it in a way that I can learn more about the level of investment that I want to do with my personal savings later on down the road. It kind of checks those 3 boxes. So I'm going to learn real estate because it's going to help me build a savings account and teach me how to sell. And I'll learn more about where to invest my money when I want to invest it anyways, right? But like, I don't know where it's going past that. Like, I don't know what the next step of business is.
I don't know either. I mean, like I could make, $100,000 in drop shipping and just be like, okay, I'm just going to buy a E39 M5 and start a YouTube channel and just like be like E39 M5 drift kid and fucking see if I can make money. Like, I don't know, right? Like, it could be fucking anything, right? But it's just like, it's interesting to watch us play different games in the same game of business. And like looking at those, and like both super smart, perseverant, hardworking people that are trying to make something happen, right?
Well, there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Right. Exactly.
It's 2 different techniques. Mine is really centered right now on like, okay, how do I develop the skills to sell and also save up the money to be able to do whatever it is that I want to do? Okay, so segment 2 is on our generation's perspective. I don't think we can effectively have this conversation and only like bully people who play video games. I think we should also consider the fact that although the silent generation beat up on the boomers for liking rock and roll, that music has grown into one of the raddest forms of music we have and eventually gave birth to rap, which is another legendary evolution of music. So in the same vein, we could be wrong about shitting on video games, right? So I'll start this with the question, which is don't take it from your perspective, but take it from the perspective of people who play video games in our generation. So like yesterday, I asked Grace and Robbie about this, or like Zeke. What do you think is so captivating about video games to the people who enjoy playing them right now, whether or not they apply it to business?
Instant dopamine hit. I think it's really fun. I think it's a way to connect with people online. I think it's a way to release steam and kind of relax after work or kind of distance yourself from the potentially harsh reality of whatever your life is.
Right.
Um,
Escapism.
yeah, escapism. I think it can be rewarding in the instant dopamine hit stuff. And I think it's a good talking point with a lot of people, even in real outside of life, because a lot of different people play video games and play the same video games that might be coming out recently. And so it's a good way to kind of have an alternate reality that you live in that's a video game reality that you enjoy more or potentially more than your real day-to-day 9 to 5 style life.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to fail in video games, you know? Like it's easy to have a shit day at work and fudge a presentation and like have a shit day, but like you don't really frequently have a shit day in video games. Like usually, like even if it's net negative overall, you can easily think about the positives and then enjoy it and want to go back and do it again. So like
Yeah.
with Ark, that's the video game where there's like dinosaurs and you can like build machine guns and shit, right?
Okay.
Some days you play and like you fuck up and like half your dinosaurs die and like you blow up your house on accident and like shit sucks, right? But you still want to go back to it the next day because while you were doing it, you were still communicating with your friends and you learned a lesson and now you want to go back and try again and like you're ready for the dopamine hit of rebuilding it, you know?
Yeah.
But I think that in general, progression in video games happens faster than in real life. So like even in Arc or The Sims, for example, I asked Grace about this the other day. I was like, how many hours of playing The Sims would it take to build an entire city? And she was like, I don't know, maybe like 10 hours. And I was like, right. In video game world, 10 hours is a long time. So like that's a big dopamine hit because you're building something big in video game that takes 10 hours. But to build a city in real life is 10 years at the fastest, right? So it's like everything is kind of like shrunk down or scaled down a bit. But relatively speaking, you can hit the dopamine fast. Isn't it? It's kind of crazy to me that some people don't like to play The Sims because it takes too long to get stuff done.
Yeah.
Still, it's like you can build an entire city in 10 hours. What the fuck are you talking about? You know?
Yeah. And you couldn't build a city in 10 years in real life.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's all
Maybe
really
you could, but
I
it'd be really fucking hard. That's beside
build
the
this city in 10
point.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're trying to do it with the line in Dubai. You know?
Oh, yeah. Sure.
It's really fast paced compared to real life, which I think is good because you can get through hard shit faster. So like when you fail in a video game, you hit respawn and maybe it takes you 5 minutes to get back to where you were before, or an arc, maybe like a day and a half.
Yeah.
Right. But like rarely do you lose so much that you're really level set back to ground zero. Which I think speaks to some of the skill advantages to video games because, you know, like in I'm trying to think of an example. I wish I had played more video games to prepare for this podcast. But like
I don't.
if you start a video game and you die immediately, like Smash Bros, I guess, right? I don't know what the fucking buttons are in Smash Bros. So like I die immediately, right? But the more you play, after you die and you come back, you can get back to where you left off quicker because you've gotten better at the game.
Yeah.
And so then that would prepare you as well for business. I guess it's like segment 3, but like that would prepare you for business to like fail fast, you know, because you're going to get better at it. And then you can, you know, so like your first dropshipping store, if it fails after 4 months and you start another one, you know, you can get back to where you left off quicker because you've already done it, right?
Yeah.
Learn more lessons.
But to get through those first 4 months takes a lot more discipline than it does to get through one hard day of video games.
Right. Exactly. But you can.
Oh, we're supposed to be talking about the positives.
You scale up the principle of it, right?
Yes.
Also, I think that a lot of times people view it as stress relief. It's weird because it's two ends of the spectrum. It's either it's stress relief or it's not a phase, and this is going to be my career. I think that usually people will err on the side of stress relief. So like, you know, I think that if we, I haven't asked Zeke, but I think that if we ask Zeke at Pauhana why you spend so much time playing video games at Pauhana, he'll probably say, well, it's to relieve the stress of like having to run Nocturne and bartend and do all that stuff. It's like a stress relief, right?
Yeah.
Um,
The other thing I want to touch on too is, oh God, I just had such a good point and then I forgot. God damn it.
do you remember what I was talking about when you thought of it? Was it just now or was it a minute ago?
That was a minute ago, but it's all good. I'll think of it.
can
I know I
remember it.
will, because I've had this thought a couple of times, and I'll think of it.
Do you need a
Okay.
pen?
Took it.
Oh, okay.
Phone.
You've got a typewriter.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's on two ends of the spectrum. It's stress relief or it's not a phase. And go ahead.
I
Do
thought of
do
it.
your thing.
Sorry. So the thing I see really commonly is like with the stress relief stuff, and I see people post this photo, or it used to be more common. I haven't seen it recently, but they'll post a photo of like some kid playing video games, and the top caption is like, "My mom yelling at me for video games because I'm gonna be fat and ugly," and then the bottom is like a picture of Markiplier and PewDiePie, and they're both really fit, and they're like what actual big gamers look like, and it's just this like, it's a way to mentally justify playing video games all day, because it's like, well, look at these guys, they're fit. And it's like, well, yeah, they play video games for 3 hours a day, and then they can afford a fucking personal trainer, and then they can live in a nice area and have all the gym equipment they need and fucking work out diligently, and like they have discipline. You have a bag of Lay's or Cheetos on your couch. Like, that's not the fucking same. You can't take Markiplier or PewDiePie and justify the amount of time that you put into video games. You have to justify it with things that are in the same playing field as you're in, right? That would be like, it would be like me justifying
Smoking weed because Elon Musk did it
smoking
on
weed
Joe Rogan.
because Elon Musk did it on Joe Rogan.
Right.
It's like, no, like I don't effectively have the discipline, or I don't want to find out if I have the discipline to smoke weed in the evenings and also build a business.
Right.
That's not a risk I'm willing to take. It's not something I want to find out. And I think that the risk is too high for someone who, like Elon Musk, who has an infinite amount of discipline and perseverance. He could probably do anything he fucking wanted and still be able to go back to work and work on the things that he's working on, because he's just that built into that guy. I'm not that guy yet. I'm not that guy, right? Like, but it's important to realize that and not make an excuse for yourself of like, well, look at these big video gamers. They're all nice and fit. That, you know, I'm not going to get fat. And I was like, there's also a lot of fucking video gamers who are fucking fat. Like, there's a lot, right? Like, you can't, this coping mechanism of excuse, I think, is really common. I see it with I saw it with the fitness thing of video gamers.
Right.
I see it with, you know, the I need to relax after work because my day is so hard kind of thing.
Right.
You know, life is so hard, blah, 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 blah. Like, I see a lot of the excuses. I think that's a common trend that we've talked about just in the younger generation in general.
Right.
But I see it prevalent in video games. And it's like this like coping mechanism of like, well, like, look at this one-off case. Like, it exists. You know what I mean? Like, there's just like finger pointing of like, look at Markiplier. He's fit, right? Right, mom? I'm not going to get fat, mom. Look, right? Like, there's this like cope, you know, is where it's just like, people see what they want to see.
Yeah.
And that's why I have so much reservation when it comes to video games.
Yeah.
It's like, there's a lot that people who play video games don't want to see, but is definitely there.
Yeah.
And you need to look at it before you make that decision. It's the same reason that, like, Trump talks about how he's never drank alcohol or done drugs. Right. And he's like, well, if I've never had it, then I'll never have the craving for it or want it again.
Right.
It's simple. It's not like his life is low quality because he's never gone out drinking with his friends, right? Like, he has a great life and he's happy with his life. And, you know, just but he's not willing to take the risk of potentially being enlightened by alcohol by going out drinking with his buddies and like accidentally turning into an alcoholic or someone who can't be productive day to day.
Trump doesn't want to suck a dick to figure out if he's gay.
Right. That's exactly the point I'm making. And I think that a lot of those factors are ignored, especially when it comes to video games, because it's so common and it's so easy to find someone who also has these same excuses for themselves.
Yeah.
right? And so that was we're supposed to be talking about
It's-
pros, and I've successfully weighed in cons into pros.
Well, it's more so like it's saying it's recognizing a perceived positive and then maybe outlining a fault in it, right?
Yeah.
Before we talked about the negatives from our parents' perspective. So I think
True,
it's valid, right? So like the Markiplier example is really great, but the difference that people aren't seeing there, like they see like, oh, well, Markiplier plays video games all day and he's fit. So video games doesn't mean that you get fat, right? Well, okay,
There's also the guy, fucking, what was the really big guy's name?
PewDiePie?
No. He was a huge, fucking 500, 600-pound dude who plays video games all day. I sent you a couple videos of him because it's really fucking funny to watch people roast him in the comments.
Oh, the ginger guy?
Yeah.
I don't know his
Oh,
name.
God.
It annoys the shit out of me.
Yeah.
Chungus.
Anyway,
whatever.
Big Chungus.
Yeah.
He
Sorry, Chunkus. I don't know who he is.
but like, you know, that's an example of someone who has played video games their whole life, and yes, they have become successful,
Mhm.
but like, you could easily be that person,
Yeah.
right? And just be this massive dude that just sits around and play video games. And like, maybe your life is great and you love it, right? But like, you also, like, he now makes, I don't know, maybe a few grand a day or more than that, right? Whatever it is, you know, but you might not ever make that. And the probability of you making it is pretty damn low,
Mhm.
at least in my opinion, in comparison to like something else like building a business. I think it has a higher, like it would be the equivalent of like, I'm going to play basketball in high school because I want to go to the NBA. If the fucking probability is low. And you see a lot of kids shoot for that, especially in like underprivileged kids growing up because they don't feel like they have another choice. Because they grow up in an environment that's like, well, if you want to get rich and like do something successful, you got to be a rapper or an athlete or some sort of star or like what, like you just got to do something special,
Right.
right? And it's like the probability of you making it to the NBA is low. And like, yes, go for it if you want to do that. I'm not one to tell people to not follow their dreams, but like also have perspective on what it's going to take. And I think this actually dives back into like the passion thing of like people want everything to be their passion.
Mhm.
And like that does work for some people, but sometimes it doesn't. And if you're going to like, what I'm trying to say is like, there are pros to video games, but it doesn't always lead down this miracle path of fitness and awesomeness and greatness because there's a lot of people that are stuck in their fucking mom's basement playing video games. That's just a fact that people have to face despite these pros.
Yeah, I think what people fail to recognize with Markiplier and like Mr. Beast and Logan Paul and all those people, or I guess they're not really gamers, but like Markiplier and PewDiePie, we'll say that they're fit and they play video games, right? The difference is you go to your 9 to 5, you do a shift at the gas station, and then you go home and play video games and stream or make YouTube videos, right? That's cool. You're not working out at any point in your day because you have to work your sit-down job and then you work your other sit-down job playing video games. Markiplier and PewDiePie, their 9 to 5 is video games, and then they go work out after work.
Yeah.
Right? And I think it's difficult for those people to recognize that, like, oh, if I don't work out, then I will get fat, right? And if I'm playing video games, then I'm not working out and I'm getting fat. So yeah, there's a way, there's a way to be fit and to play video games, but the two are unrelated, right? But it doesn't change the fact that if you are spending all of your spare time sitting down playing video games, you will not be fit, right? Like you won't be in good shape. But it's interesting because people will counter that. They'll either say like, oh, it's going to be my career, right? In which case, like, okay, fucking full send it. You can't just do it in your spare time, right? Because that's building a brand more so than building a business, and that needs fucking effort. Like you got to really figure it out.
That's not a 30-minute dopamine hit.
No, not at all. Or it's stress relief, which is a 30-minute dopamine hit strategically, because now they're able to rationalize it and say like, well, it's okay that I play video games because I only get the 30-minute dopamine hit, right? And then it's like, okay, well, you go sit down at your 9 to 5 job and stress yourself out, and then you de-stress by sitting down and playing more video games. Like you're not going to get fit doing that either, right?
Yeah.
But it's interesting because there's so many other things that you could do to relieve stress, and people tend to prefer video games than other things, right? So like I like to go to the gym to relieve stress because that's what's comfortable for me and that's what I like, right? So if I'm if it builds up over a couple days and I'm not feeling good, I want to go do a long workout, not play video games. But it's interesting because video games give people, generally speaking, a dopamine hit, and the gym gives people endorphins, which is different, right? And I respond more so to the endorphin hit than the dopamine hit. But video games are structured in such a way that it's really easy when considering like all the different stress relief things that you could do, right? Like you could go for a drive, you could sit on the beach, you could go. I used to go to the Space Coast boathouse and just sit on the dock and like listen to music. Like those are other like real world tangible things that you could do to decompress, but people instead want to substitute it with dopamine. And I'm wondering how effective that actually is, because if you have a problem at work and you block out the noise in your own head with playing video games and getting the quick dopamine hits, you're not really processing the problem at work or finding a solution. You're kind of ignoring it and blocking it out. But if you go sit on the beach and listen to music, or like you play a game of chess or go for a drive, you allow your brain the like creative liberties to kind of solve that problem. So like people say that they come up with their best ideas in the shower, right? That's because your brain actually releases chemicals when you're relaxing in the shower to solve problems. Like that's a genuine physical chemical response that people's brains have.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that people default to the video games, and it makes me kind of question, is it really relieving stress, or is it kind of ignoring the stress that you have and not solving your problems? Because, and I'll fucking say it plainly, if your bar isn't making money to the point that you have to work shifts to work on your bar to pay your rent, playing video games isn't solving that problem. It's helping you forget about the problem.
One other benefit that I hear is like, oh, well, it helps develop your motor skills. Or like something that's been quoted recently really often is like surgeons who play video games
Make less errors.
Make less errors
Yeah, I
than
saw that.
surgeons who don't. In my mind, I'm like, are you a fucking surgeon? Like, why does it fucking matter for you? What seriously, like, what does it do? Like, okay, you develop your motor skills. Now, please tell me one thing in your fucking life other than a controller that you use your motor skills for.
Right.
Maybe fucking finger banging. I was actually going to say something else. I'm not going to say that because it's fucking super imperfect. Anyways, but like, it's like, what do you use them for?
Right.
It's like, yes, there are pros. But like, A, what's the ROI on the amount of time you have to invest into a video game in order to get that out of it?
Right.
And then B, like, for some of these pros that you list off as like wonderful things, like, do you use those things? Are they applicable for you?
Right.
Is Big Chungus using his motor skills? You know what I mean? Like, is that an important factor for him at 600 pounds or whatever it is, right? Like,
Right.
and it's just the coping thing that really bugs me.
Yeah. Well, and the motor skills thing, I struggle more so with. Strategy, I understand. Quick decision making, I understand. I get into that more in segment 3. But with the motor skills, it's like the best application I can find for the motor skills is like a fucking online surgeon simulator, which, let's face it, like it's like the Elon Musk thing. Like Elon Musk plays Diablo because he likes the strategy portion of it, and that helps him get better at his business, right? But you don't have a business or surgeon career to get better at with your. So it's the same argument that I make where it's like you can develop really valuable skills, and then you have the potential to continue playing video games and not apply any of those skills.
Yeah.
If you go start a business, you can apply those skills, and I intend to build a business and then directly call on the lessons that I learned from my 1,700 hours of Ark Survival Evolved in Minecraft and apply them quickly to solve problems faster than someone who hasn't played video games would. But if I could just continue to play Ark, then I wouldn't ever build a business and actually apply it.
And I actually think this ties back to a Robert Kiyosaki quote that we both really like, which is, many people are one skill away from great wealth.
Yeah.
And you could have a lot of skills out of video games.
I would argue
you might be one skill away from actually making that applicable.
I would argue that you're only one skill application away from great wealth. You might even have the skill, but if you don't use it, then what the fuck is the point of having it?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. It's like you might have all these great skills in video games, but you don't have the one piece of the puzzle, and you won't acquire it because you're stuck with 30-minute dopamine hits that you're addicted to. You'll never apply that one puzzle piece to actually apply it somewhere other than video games.
Right.
And so it's like, I feel like a lot of people are one puzzle piece away, and they make a wall of excuses around themselves for why it's not important to try and figure out what that puzzle piece is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it's largely blocked by the quick dopamine hits or just the lack of if you view video games as a stress relief where you're like, oh, I do this thing when I don't want to work, right? You can still develop skills that can help you get better at work. But then if you start thinking about video game as like, oh, I'm going to game so that I can practice, right? And it starts to feel a little bit more like work. So like, for some people, after 10 hours in the driving simulator, you might start to get sick of it because now it's like, okay, well, I'm analyzing this stuff and now it's starting to feel like effort. And I don't want to do that. I just want to have fun. Right. And I think some of the beauty in video games is that you can trick yourself into developing skills without it feeling like work, which is useful, but only if you go on to apply it. Right. I think that another factor of video games is that most of them hold really low consequences. So like, even if your world deletes, like when the Ark world deleted, right? They cleared the server and I had to start from ground zero, right? I still ate that day, right? Like I had all my mobility. I didn't lose my limbs or anything. Like I still had money to pay for gas. I just had to start over playing the video game. And so it's really easy to get addicted to those video games because the answer to, well, what's the worst that can happen is, well, I just have to like do it again. And that's not that bad.
Yeah.
But in real life, if you bet all of your money on there being a streaker at the Super Bowl tonight and that doesn't happen, those are big consequences because now you can't pay rent. And I think one of the reasons people enjoy the video games is that there's no consequences to those actions, right?
Yeah.
Because if you say the wrong thing at work, you could be fired. But if you say the wrong thing in the fucking Xbox chat, then maybe it gets clipped and put on TikTok and it gets a bunch of likes because it's funny,
Yeah.
right? Collaboration in video games is also low stress. At work, I can't call my coworker a fuck nugget for not doing something. But if I'm playing Call of Duty and someone like gets me killed, I can be like, what the fuck are you doing, you dipshit, right?
Yeah.
Low consequences, low stress scenario, right? Another way to relax. A lot of these that I have written out is like a relaxing type of thing. A huge one is games are very immersive and they're structured to have solutions to every problem. So when people face problems in the real world, they often don't know what steps to take to solve it or if a solution even exists. Yet in video games, players can be certain that there must be a solution available somewhere.
Yeah.
So like I played the Lego games on Xbox growing up, right? And as you go through each level, like each mission per se, you can collect like a special brick, right? And sometimes I would play a level straight through. I'd kill all the bad guys, like I'd do it in the right amount of time. But I didn't I didn't unlock the specific area to find the brick. And so like sometimes you have to Google it and be like, where the fuck is this special brick in this mission? And they go, oh, you have to double jump up this like step to this off-screen area, and then you can run in and get the brick there, right? And so it's like, even if I run through this mission 4 times and I don't see that special brick, I know it's there somewhere because all of the levels have a special brick. But in real life, if
There
you don't,
be no brick.
there might be no brick, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that sucks because there might be a brick, but you might not know how to get there. And like if you have played video games frequently enough to convince yourself that there's a solution somewhere, you'll get after it and find that solution. But if you haven't played video games or you haven't been faced with challenging problems before, you might go like, well, I don't know if there's an answer to that. And like not even try.
Yeah.
And totally miss out on it.
Sure.
I see people like that. I mean, I was like that when I was in college. I was like, oh, because you were like, what kind of sports car do you eventually want to get? And I was like a 12C because it's 90 grand and affordable. And you were like, well, what about like a multi-million-dollar car? And I go, well, I don't know how to make $1 million. And you were like, well, someone has to, right?
Yeah.
There's so many people that do it. Like someone has to know how. And then I was like, oh, and I played video games. So like I had never even considered that there might be a solution to that problem. I was just like, oh, not for me. Right. But I think that one of the potential benefits of a video game is that it's more relaxing because there's always a solution, even if you don't know what it is right now. It's almost like everything's going to be okay. Like eventually I'll be able to beat the game. But in real life, most people don't have that.
Agreed.
Okay, so that's everything I have for segment 2.
That is good.
Okay,
I'm
cool.
good with that.
Segment 3. How video games can influence your ambitions in business. Video games seem to simultaneously offer skills development and a crippling addiction to fall into the void of mindless gaming. What examples can you think of that prove video games can help an individual be more prepared for or succeed in business? Not the brain dead like Call of Duty kids, but like the special cases where you can actually apply it.
The one that comes to mind most prominently is creativity. I think that video games have the potential to teach you how to be a creative and independent thinker, especially the video games like Minecraft.
Yeah.
Right? And so, in Minecraft, similarly, there's not always a clear solution to the problem you're trying to solve. If you're trying to make some fucking portal and you don't look it up on Google and you're just mixing around bricks and fucking chopping shit and trying stuff, right? I'm very fucking well versed in video games.
Never played Minecraft.
No, I actually did for a year, but I was just like
Got it.
really basic at it. Like I just built a house and I was like, I like a house.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But you know, like that side of things, I think it can teach you how to think creatively or how to think outside the box. And I think that can be valuable.
Yeah.
And like in business, there are times where you have to look at your business or look at what's going wrong. And it might be something within the analytics you're looking at, but not displayed by a numerical value. It might be a culmination or a factor of different metrics that you have to combine in order to understand what the real problem is. And I think that creative side can come in handy.
Yeah.
I think in addition to that, I would say, what do you have?
I have a list. So
yeah, great. This was the one section I like did the least on in my sheet.
But that makes sense because the first section you had a lot of stuff on because largely your perspective is that video games don't help.
Yeah,
right.
Fair enough.
And so it's challenging to think of examples where they could help if like your position is that they don't. Right. So it's like trying to commit.
Or it's a very high risk. It's a really high risk.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And so this is talking about like regardless of the risks, like what are the benefits?
Yeah.
Right. I guess the title is how can they influence your ambitions? So I guess they could influence you negatively, but I took it from the perspective of like, where could there be positives, right? Because I am choosing to believe that out there are people similar to the position that I was in, where I was video gaming like way too much. And then I stepped out of the computer into the real world and realized that I can actually apply these things, right?
Yeah.
And Elon Musk has the same thing with Diablo, right? He says, playing strategy games taught me about resource allocation and prioritization, right? So like with Minecraft, if I know I want to build a house, I know I'm going to need a bunch of wood, right? Well, okay, how long do I go chop trees down for until I have the right amount of wood, right? Well, if I spend too much time chopping trees, I only have 30 minutes to play this game before I have to go to class, right? So if I spend too much time chopping trees, I'm not going to be able to build my house because I won't have time. But if I don't chop enough trees, then I'm not going to finish the house. And I'm going to be thinking about it while I'm at class, right?
Yeah.
So I think that there's, some benefit to that because every business, you have to make the most of what you have, right? You want the business to be efficient. So it's resource allocation.
Yeah.
Which I think is super important. But a big one that I have is quick decision making. And that's more so in like the Call of Duty style video games. This is me giving a little bit of credence to like the shorter, quick dopamine hit video games, right? So like Temple Run was huge when we were in like high school or middle school or something, right? Essentially for the game, there's a guy running, collecting coins, and you have to swipe to the left or right side of the screen to get him to avoid.
Yeah, I remember that game. Yeah.
Right. And in that game, like something comes up really quickly and you have to make a decision right away. So you have to have good reaction time or you can build your reaction time into that game.
Yeah.
Which can then be used later on, maybe in a car accident, maybe avoid a car accident because you have quick decision making, right?
Yeah.
In business, maybe not so much, but like you can even build it out into a larger, how do I say this? There are more complex games out there where you have to make fast decisions that have longer lasting consequences than just running into the bad guy in Temple Run and starting over, right?
Yeah.
And if you make the wrong call, then you lose the game and you have to start over. So I think Diablo is like that, but I don't know. I've never played. I have no idea. But similarly, like if you're in negotiations for your business and like you need this deal to go through and you say the wrong shit or you read someone the wrong way and you make a bad call, right? Or if they're like, hey man, listen, like we'll do 15%, take it or leave it. It's our last offer. I'm going to get up and leave. Like you're in the Shark Tank, you have to figure it out. I think that video games can help you hone those skills and at the very least make you more calm under pressure, right? Because if you're consistently putting yourself under pressure in these quick decision video games, even if you make the wrong call, you're not going to be sweating it, I think that's valid. Also, long-term strategy plays and critically counter strategy plays. So not just long-term strategy plays in like what skills should I be investing in today or where should I put my money today for the business to pay off in the long run, but also if you're in an industry where you're directly competing with somebody else, maybe this is more applicable to a sport, but even in some business, right? It's like a great example, like shorting someone in stocks, right? What's your counter play for that? because you're betting on someone not doing well, right?
Yeah.
So can you pick up an indicator that a company is about to not do well and then short that, right? So I saw a TikTok the other day of a guy who was like, he was like maybe 16. Now he's older, but he was like, when I was 16, I was in a gas station and every morning I would go in and buy Snapple, right? Like the iced
Yeah.
tea. And usually the refrigerator is full of Snapple. And I went in this one morning and I noticed that only like half of the door was full of Snapple. Like most of it was other drinks. And so he talked to his brother, who is a stockbroker, and he was like, is there any way I can make money on this? And the guy was like, yeah, it's called a short because you think that the company's going to do worse. And he was like, yeah. So he gave all the money he had, like $200 on this stock. And it turns out that Snapple was on like a huge like bull run at that point. Like the earnings every year, every quarter, like up and up and up. And this earnings call was their first one where they were short. And so he made a bunch of money on that because he made a stock option call, right? So
And that person turned into Warren Buffett.
could be. I don't know. But not this guy, but that's a counter strategy play.
Yeah.
Like how to make moves on someone else or how to block someone else from getting your thing. So like, patenting or trademarking your stuff could be a way to protect your thing. I saw another guy, he's an artist online, who made a 3D model rendering of something that Disney eventually ripped off and made a bunch of products out of and sold for a bunch of money.
Got it.
So another counter strategy play could be trademarking your stuff, right? What's another one? Continuous risk assessment. At any point in Call of Duty, you're trying to figure out, okay, I know that a bad guy could come from the left. I know a bad guy could come from the right. I can only look at one. So which one am I going to look at? And what's the likelihood that someone comes out this way or that way? Can I hear them coming? Something else. And there's a similar comparison that you can make to business with continuous risk assessment, where it's like, okay, how's my customer satisfaction doing this week? Are our drink orders getting out on time, right? For like a kava bar, that's what I'm thinking of. Things like that. Like, is there any risk that is developing that I'm not paying attention to? Are my employees pissed off about something or other? Can I fix it? If I don't fix it, is it going to get worse? Something like that. Because another part of leadership and business is, what are the problems that you can afford to not fix? Because that's extra resources that you don't have to pay for, right? So like, I don't know, for example, if your tip jars are really shitty and you don't actually ask your customers to tip your bartenders and your bartenders are upset about it, can you afford to not do anything about it because you're not going to lose your bartenders over it? Or is it going to become a bigger issue, right? So far, they haven't had to do anything about it, right? As much as it pains
Or
me.
can I afford to use 11 Labs for my AI voiceover because it's pretty high quality on my advertisements rather than hire someone $200 to do a custom voiceover that then I would have to pay them another $200 if I wanted it edited?
Exactly.
Is it good enough to get, the clicks that I need because it's realistic enough, or is the extra $200 to have a real person do it worth it, right? Because the voiceover you heard, I mean, I don't know. I think you agreed, but like it feels really fucking real to me.
Yeah.
Like it's closer than most of the AI voiceovers I've heard. Yeah. A broad amount of them.
I think that I also have to remember that at the risk of losing my humbleness, I think that we are above average intelligence of people in the world. And so we likely have a higher bar of expectations for fake things. So like the AI images,
we have to look at it all the fucking time. Like
Right.
we're tuned to it. Whereas there's a lot of people, they might only see a handful here and there. And like most of the shit that we might see is like, oh, that's definitely fucking fake. They might be like, I don't know, I think that's real.
Right.
Like there's a lot of people like that.
Exactly. And so if we're primed to go like, I don't know if that looks real to me or not, right? First 3 years, there's probably been people who have been fully fooled by it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's a great example. And to tie it to video games, it's like in Arc, as you gain like experience levels, you can like unlock different like whatever skill paths or something, right? So like, do I unlock the weapons skill path or like the shielding skill path? And based on what kind of base you're building, maybe you want to defend better, or maybe if you're going to try to take other people's shit, you want to attack more, right? But you can only pick one, and you're not going to be able to like fill the other branch out for like another like 3 weeks. So which way are you going to go? Which can you afford to not upgrade, right?
Yeah.
I guess that's more like resource allocation, but I think risk analysis is kind of like a part of that too. But something else that you can learn from it, right? Similarly, chess isn't a video game. Chess is a game, but Andrew Tate talks about chess all the time in comparison to like his business and the things that he does and how you can apply it all the time, right?
Yeah. The reason I laughed at the real world that we were talking about earlier is because his business is called The Real World.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
Got it. I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, he has 2 names for it. It's The Real World and Hustlers University. He has their own 2 different names in case one of them gets, walked
It's
up.
called The Real World because is like everything is the matrix and you're living in the system and all the liberals are controlling you,
Yeah,
right?
and unlocks the real world to unlock your business potential or whatever you're trying to do with blank.
Got it. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another one that I have is games teach you to fail fast and adapt quickly to new information, which is similar to the example I had earlier, where if your dropshipping store fails in 2 months, you'll be able to build the next one back out to where you were at the moment it failed in 2 weeks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it'll take you less time to get back to where you came from. So in games where you make progress and then die and have to start over, like did you ever play on Geometry Dash on your iPhone in high school? It was essentially like
I played Thumb Drift a lot. You have this little road. This is like you had this road and it had coins on it.
yeah.
And you'd slide your thumb and the car would drift. And so you'd drift around the different coins and then there would be obstacles you have to avoid and stuff. So I used to compete with my friends for a high score on that.
Got it.
That's in high school.
If you drifted off the road, would you have to start over?
You crashed. So there were barriers all along the road.
Got it.
So if you drifted off and hit a barrier, you died.
Yeah. So if you drift off and you die, right? Like the first time you ever play, you die immediately, right?
Yeah.
But the next time you can make it a little bit further because you can anticipate that, right? Great example
Yep.
of you fail quickly and then the next time you do a little bit better. You get a little bit. Flappy Bird, another example.
Yeah.
And you probably go a little bit
Subway
further
Surfer.
each time. Yeah, exactly. You can go a little bit further each time, right?
Yeah.
And I think what's important about that is if you do it enough times, you recognize that like, oh, okay, well, if I die, like if I fail, it's not a big deal and I can do it again.
Yeah.
And so you could attribute that to business where it's like, okay, well, if this one doesn't work out, that's fine. Like, yeah, I'll make it work out or I'll do a different thing and then that'll work out.
I agree with that assessment and I like it. The thing I struggle with is that with a video game, it's never actually real.
Mhm.
But like with a business, like if you fuck up, like you actually may go bankrupt and the IRS may come after you and you may be fucked,
Mhm.
right? Like there's an aspect of like it affects your real life in a very real way. And like although the on paper translation is there, the emotional stability and maturity it takes to get through something like that business wise versus video game wise, there may be a large discrepancy between those things.
I think there's a big discrepancy.
Yeah.
But I think that you're probably a given person. If you're comparing two people, one of them grew up, more sheltered, more like get good grades, get a good job, go to work, whatever, right? But maybe they want to start a business. They might be more likely to get stuck in analysis paralysis than the kid who grew up maybe in the same path, but played video games where you had to fail iteratively and like adapt to get better. He might be more willing to take the risk to do it, to try it, right?
Mhm.
Because he knows that even if it fails, like he's going to make it work, right?
Yeah.
I think that's an attribute that both of us have, whether or not we attribute it to video
Sure.
games, whatever. But it's a skill that you could develop playing video games, right?
Yeah.
I probably developed it a little less playing video games because I didn't play that style of video games, but still, I think it's a skill that it's a common thread that I can find.
Right.
Multiplayer games require teamwork, leveraging team members' strengths, which is integral for leadership, right? So if you need to, I don't know, run an SAE team and you've got a team of fucking dipshits, and you need someone to design the nose cone, you're going to pick the kid that does like the best reports because the nose cone is the most important part of the entire structure, right? So like picking people and picking their strengths for specific positions, you also have to, I used to play this game called Pulsar, I think is what it was called. It was like a space game, right? Where you're like in a spaceship and like one person is the pilot who flies and one person does the weapons and one person does like the shields, right? And we would rotate, my friends and I, and we would die like fucking every time except this one configuration where like, I was doing the guns and someone else was doing the shields or whatever, right? That's the configuration that worked for us. So we found our natural strengths, and then every time we played the game, we were successful after that.
Yeah.
And then that could also teach you, especially if you play with different people frequently, how to quickly analyze and test who has what strengths and where did they excel the best, because that's where they need to be in a business. Or in the inverse of that, a game like Among Us can teach you to like lie and be deceptive or use social situations to your benefit, right? Which could help in like negotiations or something, like getting someone on your side, right? Even like, let's say you're not lying to try to, like, let's say you're not the imposter, right? Let's say that you are being accused of being the imposter and you need to sway someone like, no, I'm telling the truth, right? How do you get someone to effectively believe that you're telling the truth, right? That's another social skill that could apply to the real world. So those are the examples that I have in which it can positively influence your business.
I agree.
Yeah.
And also a word of caution for people to not use them as an excuse to play video games.
Yeah. Don't play video games because you
Right.
think that
If you're playing video games and you like video games and you enjoy them, enjoy it in moderation and build these skills and try to apply these benefits with that extra puzzle piece to something, something that's more long-term growth oriented,
right.
I guess.
Right. Maybe. It's more so like
It's hard for me to say like something better without saying like something better. You know what I mean? I don't want to make it sound like, anything other than video games is just better than video games, right? But because what I'm trying to say is like, I don't want it to sound like video games are less than like a business or, real estate or whatever, right? To each their own, do whatever you want. But my recommendation, it's hard for me to ignore the risk factor that comes with video games. There are benefits, but there's a high risk factor.
don't trick yourself into thinking yes, you're building something important by playing video games, right?
Yes.
When you're building something important, recall the skills that you developed when you played video
The
games.
skills are important, but if you don't apply the skills, they're useless.
Right.
Yeah. So thank you for helping me make my point.
When you went to college, you got your engineering degree because you were passionate about engineering.
Right.
And now that you're starting a business, you can utilize a lot of the skills that you gained from engineering to do that. But you didn't get your engineering degree thinking that all of this stuff was going to help you build a business, right?
Right.
So an inverse to that is I decided to do systems engineering at Northrop Grumman instead of applying for a mechanical engineering position because I felt that learning how to design systems would help me design a business later on down the road.
Sure.
I'm getting my real estate license because I think that learning how to sell will help me better apply the systems down the road, right?
Yes.
So now
part of the reason I love dropshipping is I think that learning to build good advertisements that captivate people will be valuable down the line.
Right.
There's
right. That's an example of picking a skill and then developing that skill.
Yes.
Right. But it's because that's a really specific skill. Building systems, building advertisements, learning how to sell. Those are specific skills. But engineering isn't a skill, it's a way of thinking. Similarly, video games isn't a specific skill. It's like a wide range of like discipline.
Yeah.
Right. So like don't play video games thinking that you're becoming a fucking business god when you should be figuring out why your bar isn't making any money and doing something about it.
Yes.
Okay, here's my dial in for the day. This is a no-name person, her name is Jane McGonigal. I don't know who the fuck she is. She's a game designer and an author. But her quote is, "Games make failure fun. They train us to be more resilient, to experiment, and to try again when things don't work out. These are the same qualities that make great entrepreneurs." And that's similar to the thing that I was saying earlier where, you want to iterate, right? So a lot of people will get stuck in analysis paralysis and not try something because they're so afraid of the repercussions that they think it will end their entire world. And like sometimes you do get into a hole that deep and it happens. But like for the sake of conversation, let's say, games teach you that you can bounce back from anything. You can be resilient. There is a solution out there. You just have to find it, right? Maybe no one's found it yet, but it's out there. You have to develop it yourself. And I think they just generally will teach you to be more resilient.
Very cool. Thank you for our dial-in quote.
Yeah. That's it. Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Have a good week.